Thanks, Neil. I thought it was, yeah, I thought it recorded when we started, but I think you have to select that option. Thank you for that note, Neil. So before we get started, which was one of the housekeeping items, I guess, was to make sure that we record the meeting. So the first thing is that audio is available for this presentation through your computer or by telephone. Please keep your microphone muted to avoid background noise and feedback. If you have questions during the presentation, you're welcome to type them into the chat box. We will have a dedicated time to answer some of the questions at the end of key segments in the presentation. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please contact us through the chat box and we will try to troubleshoot the issue or issues. Closed captioning is available on the bottom left of your screen. And we will plan to post the presentation on our website for those who were unable to attend today.
Great, thank you, Mark. Welcome everyone to today's stakeholder engagement event. My name is Michael Baca, and I am the manager of the Control Strategies Group in the Air Quality Bureau. I just want to go over the agenda for today. We're going to start with a brief introduction to the department, the Bureau, and also to my group and the work that we do. One of the larger projects that we are currently working on is the Regional Haze project, and we want to spend some time today discussing the development of that plan. Following that discussion, we'll be talking about other projects that my section is working on or will be working on this calendar year. So we would like to bring your attention to some of the new and emerging issues that will start to shape the work that we do over the coming months and years. And finally, we do want to spend some time at the end of the presentations to answer any questions and discuss some of the resources that are available to you, and also solicit some feedback from you for improving our stakeholder engagement events and continuing the conversation around air quality in New Mexico. So with that, before we introduce yourselves though, next slide, please. I would like to familiarize you with the mission and structure of the Air Quality Bureau. In our jobs, we strive every day to protect the inhabitants and natural beauty of New Mexico by preventing the deterioration of air quality. So we can see some pictures here of New Mexicans enjoying the state fair. Looks like one of our lakes, possibly Elephant Butte Lake there. And we have some pictures below of the natural beauty of New Mexico and some of the Class 1 areas that we have. It looks like we have, 4, 5, 6, about 8 pictures there, of the Class 1 areas. I think we have 9 Class 1 areas, but there's thousands of these areas in New Mexico that we know are special to people, and we're trying to protect those and protect their health while they're visiting these areas. So a little bit more about the structure and the breakdown of how the Air Quality Bureau works. We have 4 sections in the Air Quality Bureau that are responsible for administering our program. And the New Mexico Environment Department Air Quality Bureau has jurisdiction over the entire state of New Mexico, except in Bernalillo County and on tribal lands. So I will give a brief overview of each section, starting with our operations section, which is responsible for collecting the monitoring data and ensuring that that data is valid and defensible in a court of law. Our administrative staff are also housed within this section. Our compliance and enforcement group conduct inspections at major sources of air pollution, and they also investigate public complaints. They review compliance reports submitted to the department, and they conduct enforcement to bring our regulated community back into compliance with the law. Our permitting group reviews notices of intent and applications for permits for compliance with our regulations, as well as issue permits to sources for construction or operation of those sources. They also process permits for facility modifications and revisions. And each one of these sections do quite a bit more than what I'm just going over right now. I just kind of describing the general functions of each section. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit more about where we reside within the Air Quality Bureau, which is the planning section. And within planning section, we have our group, the control strategy section, but we also have the modeling and emissions inventory group, and also the small business environmental assistance programs. So our modeling staff review the dispersion modeling that is submitted with permit applications. And our EI group collects emissions information from major sources of air pollution each year. And additionally, in 2020, our emission inventory group started collecting emissions information for minor sources, and they plan on collecting this information every 3 years. So we started this in 2020, and we plan on collecting information for the 2023 calendar year starting next in 2024, next year. Our small business environmental assistance program provides compliance assistance services to help our small businesses in the state navigate our complex regulatory system that we have in air quality. So this can include that group doing environmental assessments, helping small businesses get fee reductions, and assisting them with any of the paperwork that they may need to do. So I'm going to be discussing what the control strategies group does in the next slide, but before we move on, I would like to introduce a little bit more of our staff that is here today. And so I would like to start with my new boss, Kirby Olson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kirby Olson. I'm the new section chief of the planning section, which includes the control strategy staff that's giving the presentation today. A number of you might remember me from my previous position where I was manager of major source permitting for the Air Quality Bureau. But I'm very excited to have moved on to this new role, working with the control strategies groups and the other parts of planning. So thank you, Mike.
I think next we'll move to Mark. We met him briefly, but maybe he can provide a little bit more about his background.
Sure, thank you. Mark Jones. I work in the Farmington field office here in Northwest New Mexico, and I'm in the control strategies unit along with Michael.
Thanks, Mark. We'll move next to Neil.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Neil Butt. I'm in the control strategies unit as well. I'm in the Albuquerque field office. I've been in the environmental health field for 25 years, the past 21 of which have been in air quality and control strategies. And I'm providing technical support to Mark in the regional Haze effort.
And Armando.
Hello, my name is Armando Paz. I've been with the environment department for past 18 years, the past 4 years with control strategies. I'm down here in the Las Cruces field office, and I implement the dust mitigation plan for Doña Ana and Luna counties. I prepare and submit exceptional events demonstrations to EPA each year in regards to the PM10 exceedances due to high wind blowing dust. I also revised the state implementation plan, particularly for the Las Cruces, El Paso, New Mexico, Texas non-attainment area for ozone, the New Mexico portion of that SIP. Thank you.
Thanks, Armando. And I introduced myself again. I'm Michael Baca. I've worked for the New Mexico Environment Department for about 18 years now, 15 of which have been with the Air Quality Bureau. And so now I'd like to discuss a little bit more about what it is exactly that the Control Strategies Group does and what we're responsible for in our day-to-day job duties.
Michael?
Sure.
So I just wanted to make sure that you said that initially people were in a lobby Just wanted to make sure that we had invited or had allowed everyone through to the meeting before getting too far along. Is there a lobby option in WebEx where you can just admit all?
I am not seeing that.
Or how were you previously? How were you able to let people in?
Well, did you do anything to let everyone else in?
No, the people just started joining, and I think the setting that I had, I think, was just to. I don't think I required people to wait in the lobby.
Okay, it might have just been at the very beginning of the meeting,
Okay.
and you just had to open it once to let me in.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's keep going then.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah. See.
Great. So, a little bit about what the Control Strategies Group does. Our main duty, we are responsible for the development of New Mexico State Implementation Plan, or SIP. The SIP is a collection of programs, rules, plans, permits, etc., that outline how the department's going to implement the Federal Clean Air Act in New Mexico, and especially as it pertains to achieving the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, for the criteria air pollutants. And as EPA promulgates the new standards, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the New Mexico Environment Department is required to evaluate and, if necessary, modify our program in order to demonstrate that we have the programmatic capabilities to implement each standard. This type of SIP we generally refer to as infrastructure SIPs, and they also include the good neighbor provision or transport provision. For those of you that follow with air quality news, that has been a big thing lately. EPA's conducting some actions right now in regards to that provision. We also work on SIPs to bring areas back into attainment with these standards. So those are generally referred to as attainment SIPs or non-attainment SIPs. And we do those when we are not meeting one of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We also work on standalone SIPs that are not related to the NAAQS, like the Regional Haze SIP, which is a visibility protection plan, which we will be discussing a lot more today. We also work on adopting both SIP and non-SIP rules, such as the recent rulemakings for our non-attainment permitting rule, the ozone precursor rule, and the CO2 emission limits rule that we just adopted for coal-fired power plants under the Energy Transition Act. We also administer other non-SIP air quality management plans, such as our dust mitigation plan and ozone advance, as well as special projects like the VW Mitigation Trust, DARA, and air quality monitoring and modeling studies. We also lead and participate in a number of stakeholder groups, including Border 2025, the Four Corners Air Quality Group, the Westar RAP organization, and the National Association of Clean Air Agencies. And at the heart of all this work, the one common element to all of the work that we do is stakeholder engagement. So that is one thing that all of these projects kind of have underlying it or have in common, is that there's always a stakeholder engagement piece to each one of those. So through our stakeholder engagement events that we have been conducting since this past summer, the Control Strategies Group is trying to, we're trying to improve our relationships with our stakeholders to help build their knowledge base and better equip them to participate in our process. So we want to cover the traditional outreach and educational materials during these events for our stakeholders, but we really want to strive to improve our communication. And not only how we communicate with our stakeholders, but we really want to improve how stakeholders communicate with us. And it's critically important because your input is crucial to the development of all the work that we do. And it allows for us to come up with uniquely New Mexican solutions to any of the challenges that are facing us. One of the first things when I came into the air quality field is that, one of the ideas and thoughts we had is that we do not want the federal government telling us, developing plans for New Mexico from Dallas or Washington, D.C., before we get to put New Mexican input into that. So since I have worked for the Bureau, public input has always been one of the most important pieces that guides how our work gets done. So we're looking to build a continuous dialogue with our stakeholders that goes beyond any individual project or individual pollutants. And with that said, I think we have a lot to cover today, and I want to be mindful of our time so that we might be able to get to a little bit of that at the end of our presentation today. So now I will turn the mic back over to Mark Jones to give us some information regarding regional haze planning and a little bit of overview on that.
Great. Thank you, Michael. All right. Well, again, I'm Mark Jones with the Control Strategy section, and I'm the technical lead for regional haze planning over the last 4 years or so. So today we will begin with background information on visibility in the regional haze program. We will talk about EPA's 8-step guidance on state plans for this second implementation period, which is from 2019 to 2028. And we'll provide an overview and New Mexico status update on step 1, which is the ambient data analysis. So starting with some of the background, the Clean Air Act established special goals for visibility in many national parks and wilderness areas and international parks. Through the 1977 amendments to the Clean Air Act, Congress set a national goal for visibility as the prevention of any future and the remedying of any existing impairment of visibility in mandatory Class 1 federal areas, which impairment results from man-made air pollution. These amendments required EPA to issue regulations to assure reasonable progress toward meeting the national goal. The Clean Air Act gives special air quality and visibility protection to national parks larger than 6,000 acres and national wilderness areas larger than 5,000 acres that were in existence when it was amended in 1977. These are Class 1 areas. All other areas are Class 2, allowing for a moderate amount of air quality deterioration. Because air pollution is often regional in nature, reductions in pollution to improve visibility in Class 1 parks will also improve visibility in all parks in the surrounding area. Class 1 areas are managed by several federal land managers, including the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and also several, also beyond the federal land managers, there's several Native American tribes that also manage Class 1 areas. And here's a link to EPA's website on visibility and regional haze. Their website includes updated announcements about the ongoing regional haze program, educational resources, and there's also information on visibility in national parks and wilderness areas. And in addition to this, there's access to several other technical, regulatory, and guidance documents. So EPA and other agencies have been monitoring visibility in national parks and wilderness areas since 1988. In 1999, the US EPA announced a major effort to improve air quality in national parks and wilderness areas. This was the Regional Haze Rule, which called for state and federal agencies to work together to improve visibility in 156 national parks and wilderness areas, such as Grand Canyon, Yosemite, the Great Smokies, and other areas shown here in the map. These areas are designated as mandatory Class 1 areas. The Regional Haze Rule requires the states, in coordination with the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and other interested parties, to develop and implement air quality protection plans to reduce the pollution that causes visibility impairment at these areas. And in New Mexico, we have 9 of these. And we will be discussing more in this presentation and in our regional, in our New Mexico Regional Haze State Implementation Plans, these 9 Class 1 areas. Here's a map and list showing the 9 Class 1 areas in New Mexico. The 9 areas include Bandelier Wilderness Area, Bosque del Apache Wilderness Area, Carlsbad Caverns National Park, the Gila Wilderness Area, Pecos Wilderness Area, Salt Creek Wilderness Area, Wheeler Peak Wilderness Area, and the White Mountain Wilderness Area. And I'd like to give a shout out to Carrie Jones here with the U.S. Forest Service, who has been helping us put together a few new maps for the Class 1 areas. So at this point, we are going to see here. Oh, the poll is, no, the poll isn't there yet. So at this point, we're going to experiment with a poll question to the audience to see which, if any, of these areas you have visited in New Mexico. And make sure I have all of them on here, the poll question. I think I do. Let's see. Oh, wait, hold on one second. Oh, I had left one of them off. Hold on one second. Let me go ahead and add that one. Pedro Parks. I left off the one that's nearest to me and that I've visited the most. Let's see. All right, thanks for your patience. So you should now see the poll in your WebEx browser, your browser. I think there's 3 dots to the, I think it's on the bottom right-hand side where you can open the poll. And you have, I just put a 5-minute time limit on it or whatever. So let me just check with Michael. Were you able to see it, or did it come up?
I am. I'm seeing the
Great.
poll results. So it does look like people are responding. We have about half of the people so far, a little more than half now, that are starting to do the poll.
Great, great.
So again, a reminder, Marcus did point out that the polling, if it did not pop up for you right away, in your bottom right-hand corner of your screen, of your WebEx screen, there are 3 ellipses, the 3 dots. Just click on that, and there is a function for polling there. You can click on that, and it should pop up. Under that function, there's also a Q&A box. So Please feel free to pop any of your questions into the Q&A box or into the chat at any time that you have those.
Great, thank you, Michael. All right, let's keep motoring on here. This talks about the regional planning organizations. Many of you have probably heard of the RAP or some of these other what are called abbreviation is RPOs. And so because the pollutants for regional haze that lead to regional haze can originate from a lot of sources across broad geographic areas, EPA has encouraged the states and tribes across the US to address visibility impairment from a regional perspective. These regional planning organizations that were developed evaluate technical information to better understand how their states and tribes impact national parks and wilderness areas, class 1 areas across the country. The regional planning organizations pursue the development of regional strategies to reduce emissions of particulate matter and other pollutants leading to regional haze. The organizations also help states meet the consultation requirements of the regional haze rule. And New Mexico is an active member of the Western Regional Air Partnership planning organization shown in red in this map. The Western Regional Air Partnership, or RAP as we call it, provides technical data and technical services for Western states. It also is a forum for consultation to develop communications and coordination with states, tribes, EPA, and federal land managers. For this current implementation period, the second, which runs from 2019 to 2028, RAP states work together to develop a storyboard which provides an overview of Western perspectives on regional haze, publicly accessible content, and abundant visuals showing some of the class 1 areas throughout the RAP Western region. And there's a website. I encourage you to check out the storyboard. It provides a lot of good information about the background of the regional haze program and how it's developed over time, and talk some about some of the progress from when the program originally started. So New Mexico has 8 improved monitors that are located in or not near the 9 class 1 areas. This picture here was taken by Kip Carrico, is from our Bosque del Apache improved monitoring site. The improved monitors span the geography, ecology, and climatology of the state of New Mexico. These monitor sites provide a representative survey of the visual resources of the national parks and wildernesses of the region. The current visibility condition and trends will be discussed more in our step 1 overview on ambient data analysis. The federal improved network measures particle mass and converts to light extinction based on absorption. Light extinction is caused by the following pollutants listed here: ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, coarse mass, soil, organic carbon, elemental carbon, and sea salt. The regional haze rule requires states to measure or quantify haze and visibility impairment in each implementation period. EPA requires the use of a measurement of haze called deciviews. Deciviews measure how human visual perception changes over distance. A higher deciview value means the air is hazier because of particles that scatter and absorb the light. Here we see a visual illustration of what regional haze can do in a physical sense. These are pictures of the same view at Bandelier Wilderness, class 1 area, one of New Mexico's class 1 areas, but under different visibility conditions. On the left, you can see the view on a relatively more clear day. In the other pictures, you can see increasingly hazy conditions. The regional haze rule requires states to take action so that the views will become better over time. In this slide, it talks them about the visibility changes in the first planning period. And so you have a map on the left and then a map on the right. The map on the left is looks like it's from 2000 to 2004. And the map on the right is from 2013 to 2017. This is developed from the data that was collected from the improved monitors across the country. And as written here, the National Park Service has estimated that as of mid-2014, emission controls established under the first planning period have led to approximately 500,000 tons per year of SO2 and 300,000 tons per year of NOx reductions. EPA estimates results of this that visibility has improved significantly, with the average visual range increased by 20 to 30 miles in Class 1 areas. And again, just checking in on, so the lower deciview would be the better visibility on the most impaired days. So from the left to the right, you can see that there's larger areas with the with lower impairment on the 20% most impaired days. All right, moving on. So New Mexico completed a state implementation plan for the first round of regional haze planning, which covered 2008 through the end of 2018 time period. And we showed some of the progress in the previous slide, which was a result of all of the plans throughout the nation, which New Mexico was just one of the many states that were part of this effort. Our New Mexico Regional Haze Planning Team is now working on the state plan revision for this current second implementation period, which runs from 2019 to 2028, as I had mentioned in a previous slide. EPA has published a series of guidances and a revised rule for the second implementation period. And New Mexico will be providing updates on our process and progress over the next several months, beginning today, with discussing the overall 8-step process briefly, and then discussing some of our work on step 1. This slide illustrates the 8 steps in EPA's guidance for this second implementation period. The orange color here denotes steps that we have mostly completed, but that are continuing, but we are continuing internal review on. The green color indicates that the steps that our team is still currently working on as we move forward. And so, let's see here. I think I was just going to go through. So I was going to go ahead and go through. So the first step is ambient data analysis, which we will show some examples of in the following slides. The second step in the process is determination of affected Class 1 areas in other states. So as part of the regional haze rule, states are have a responsibility to look at other states outside of our boundaries that may be impacted by our emissions, and that consider that as part of our determination of when we start looking at potential controls. Step 3 is the selection of sources for analysis. And then step 4 is the what's referred to as the 4-factor analysis for control measures. Step 5 is that states make decisions on control measures that are necessary to make reasonable progress. Step 6 is regional scale modeling of the long-term strategy to set goals for the end of this planning period, which is 2028. And then step 7 is looking at the progress over that period of time and looking to make sure that for the most impaired days, we are making progress and reducing impairment. And for the clearest days or the least impaired days that we don't have any, we're not anticipating any further degradation on those days. And then step 8 is a sort of a catch-all for additional requirements that that are in that's in the guidance and the rule for state implementation plans. One of those additional requirements is a progress report in between now and 2028. And another very important requirement that we've begun early on in the process is outreach to stakeholders and also varying degrees of coordination as well as consultation with certain of the other partners. There's a very specific requirement for a formal consultation period with FLMs as we move closer to the hearing phase of possibly adopting a plan. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Neil Butt, who's going to continue on for us and talk a little bit more about the first step.
Thank you, Mark. So the next 6 slides will cover New Mexico's process related to the EPA and RAP's Step 1 guidance. As shown on the previous slide, this first step deals with ambient data analysis. Next slide. The Regional Haze Rule requires states to report visibility conditions during the baseline and current periods for the clearest days and most impaired days. The clearest days means the 20% of monitored days in a calendar year with the lowest amounts of visibility impairment. Conversely, the most impaired days means the 20% of monitored days in a calendar year with the highest amounts of human-made visibility impairment. For each Class 1 area, the goal set forth by the Regional Haze Rule is to return visibility to natural conditions by the end of 2064. Natural conditions are visibility conditions expected to exist in the absence of impairment resulting from human-made pollutants. Monitoring data was collected by the Improved Monitoring Network, and natural condition estimates were calculated as part of the technical analysis conducted by the RAP. Here's a screenshot from the Western Regional Air Partnership's Technical Support System, or RAP TSS for short. The TSS is an online portal to the technical data and analytical results prepared by the members of the Western Regional Air Partnership for supporting states and tribes in the development of their state and tribal implementation plans, or SIPs and TIPs, for tracking progress related to the EPA's Regional Haze Rule. The TSS project is supported by multiple state agencies with project management assistance from Westar, RAP, and technology development and operation by the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere, which operates out of Colorado State University. The TSS contains publicly accessible monitoring, emissions, and modeling data to help states track visibility conditions over time and calculate natural conditions and the uniform rate of progress. Next, we will show some of the data that is available for New Mexico's 9 Class 1 areas by using Bandelier National Monument as an example. Bandelier Wilderness Area, shown on the photo to the left, is located in the north central portion of New Mexico, as shown on the map to the right, and is a national monument. Shown here are data for Bandelier Wilderness Class 1 area for the 20% most impaired days. We will look at data for the 20% clearest days in a subsequent slide. We'll break this chart down into parts to understand what is shown here and provide some key takeaways. There are links to references at the end of this segment for those who would like to learn more about visibility and regional haze. As we discussed in Step 1 requirements, states are required to show baseline, current, and natural visibility conditions. These are represented by the 4 bar charts shown here. The first bar shows averages from the baseline period from the year 2000 to 2004. The second bar shows data from 2008 to 2012, and the third shows 2014 to 2018 data. Natural conditions, as calculated by the RAP, are shown in the fourth bar. The total deciviews for each bar are shown on the top of each bar, which represents the average deciviews. A deciview is a unit of light extinction scaled to human perception. We see a reduction from the baseline period to the current period. Since deciviews are a measurement of impairment, the lower the value, the better the visibility will be on those given days. For example, a deciview value of 14 or less could be considered very good, while a value higher than 29 would be considered very bad. Each of the bars in this chart also have a breakdown of what types of species were measured by the improved monitor. There are 7 different components, which include in order from top to bottom: sea salt, shown in light blue, which is barely able to see in this chart because it's such a small fraction of our current pollution. Next is fine soil, indicated in maroon. Coarse mass is shown by gray. Organic mass from carbon is indicated by the green color. Elemental carbon is shown by black. Ammonium nitrate in orange, and ammonium sulfate in yellow. Today we are not going to get into detail about each of the individual species that contribute to this measurement of light scattering and impairment. It's a fairly complex process. There are both natural as well as industrial sources that can contribute to visibility interference. We discussed some more on this topic during our previous 2018 and 2019 Regional Haze webinars. There's also more information on EPA's website, as well as additional links to information that we will provide at the end of this segment. One observation to note is that sulfates are the primary contributor to impairment on the most impaired days for all of our Class 1 areas. EPA stated in a 2021 clarification memo for this, the second implementation period, that consistent with the first planning period, EPA generally expects that each state will analyze sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides in selecting sources and determining control measures. In nearly all Class 1 areas, the largest particulate matter components of anthropogenic visibility impairment are sulfate and nitrate, caused primarily by particulate matter precursors such as SO2 and NOx, respectively. This issue was discussed in consultations with federal land managers and RAP states, and we'll be discussing this more in the next steps of the guidance that we will cover in the coming months. This figure shows the same type of data calculations as shown on the previous slide, only this time it is for the clearest days or least impaired days. Monitor data trends from this site at Bandelier generally follow network-wide trends. Overall, we see progress toward the Regional Haze rules goal of reducing visibility impairment on both the most impaired and the clearest days. On the previous slide, we saw a change from a baseline average of 9.7 deciviews of impairment to a current period of 8.4 deciviews. And on this slide, for clearest days, it illustrates a baseline average of 5 deciviews compared to the current period of 3 deciviews. I'll now turn it back over to Mark.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate your summary on step 1. And we've compiled data similar to what Neil presented for this particular Class 1 area, which was Bandelier, for all of our 9 Class 1 areas. And that's part of our draft SIP proposal that we've been working on. So we're going to provide just a recap on what we covered in today's webinar and with respect to regional haze and what we plan to cover in this 3-part series. So for the let's see. So for the first webinar today, we covered talked a little bit more about step 1, ambient data analysis, and then we have 2 additional webinars scheduled to cover step 2, or first, the next one is step 2, which would be March 30th, and then we have a third webinar in the series to talk more about step 3, April 27th. And the registration links are already set up for these meetings. If you would like to go ahead and interested and would like to register, you're welcome to do that. And after we do, you know, this kind of ties back to what Michael was sharing at the beginning of the meeting. You know, I've worked up in here in the Four Corners for, gosh, 17 years now, and one of the things that I've worked on is the Four Corners Air Quality Group, which does where we reached out, you know, to stakeholders and did a lot of stakeholder engagement from the beginning of that, and had some good successes with it. And so I think with this series of webinars, you know, we're, you know, part of it's engagement, part of it is just re-engagement, because we, you know, that because there's been a pause over the last year or so where we kind of lost some of the traction for making progress, at least on regional haze. We still continue to work on some of the technical aspects and fill in some of, for example, on the interstate emission impacts evaluations. We've done a pretty comprehensive look at, you know, impacts on states around New Mexico, where we have quite a few additional class 1 areas. In addition to the 9 we've been analyzing in New Mexico, we have another 11 or so in neighboring states that are, you know, either close to our border or in contiguous states. But we, you know, we have had a need to, or at least for this series, you know, we have had a need, I think, to re-engage people and kind of create a little bit of momentum. And I think we have that now. So I guess I'm just kind of trying to take things step at a time for now, literally with the with the EPA guidance. And, you know, we're working on all the steps in some capacity, but we wanted to kind of build things from the ground up again and bring along the stakeholders and possibly some additional informal consultations with FLMs and others. And so as part of this 3-part series, you know, I think we're going to be learning, you know, what's working and what's not working. So your feedback, you know, on these meetings, and, you know, I think in some of these additional registration links, I have some surveys just saying, well, what could we do better? You know, how could we engage better? And I know some, you know, we are going to probably get back into having the ability to do more in person, you know, outreach and whatnot. So, you know, we would appreciate your feedback on those topics. And I think Michael will be talking about this a little more later on. But so after we do these 3-part series, you know, we still have the additional 5 steps to do. So, but I think we want to start with this, and then kind of use this as a develop some ideas for, you know, for then doing outreach on these additional steps. And so the remaining steps here, steps 4 through 8, is quite a bit of technical work and things that we need to do as a state. You know, RAP has provided a lot of assistance, our regional planning organization, but each state, as Michael said, kind of has a little bit of a unique situation. So I just wanted to draw your attention to our events calendar. We have we launched a new NMED website a couple years ago, and I think people are still getting used to how to find information on there and you know, how the new website works. but very important is the events calendar on there. So there's what's called a Trumba calendar that has events for within that calendar. And so, for example, these two webinars, March 30th and the 27th of April, are on that events calendar. And that's really where it's easiest for us to keep, if there's changes to the meeting or, additional information we want to provide about the meeting, it's sometimes easier for us to put it on that calendar rather than, always be sending emails out. But we will usually, in most cases, also use the listserv. But the calendar's definitely one of the resources within our bureau that we would like to direct people to more. All right, so I don't know. I'm kind of excited about even within the last couple of months, we've made. I think the entire team, you'd probably agree with me that we made a lot of progress these last couple of months, and so this slide shows our current regional Haze planning team contributors from NMED, New Mexico Environment Department, as well as City of Albuquerque. Kirby Olson, our new planning section chief, is providing leadership and direction, and Michael Baca is the project manager. I serve as the technical lead. Neil, as he said, is helping on a variety of other technical support. We have Sufi, Angela, and Rosalind from our emission inventory and modeling section that have also provided technical support as requested and needed. And then Ken Miller is our connection with the City of Albuquerque, who is helping helping our efforts to stay coordinate with the City of Albuquerque on this project. The Regional Haze website is a good place to go for information about this planning period, and we also have some archives from previous round information. This link here is will take you to the website, and you can also reach out to, or it also has information here that you can reach out to myself or Michael Baca for interest in additional engagement opportunities or questions and comments you have. I think we're always happy to hear from people, and we try to be pretty responsive and timely with getting back to people on questions. And you can also, on the website, you can sign up for for our listserv, which has, where you can pick what projects you're interested in and receive notices on that. And let's see. So I have a screenshot of the website here, which kind of gives you, I realize that the print is kind of small, but it gives you a feel for what kinds of information we have on here. Talks a little bit about the EPA requirements that we're working to meet. It also lists all of our 9 Class 1 areas, and there's I think we've linked the Class 1 area so that you can go and learn more about. It takes you, I believe, to some of the federal land manager pages where you can hear about more specific or learn about more specifics on the parks. And then we have contact information on here, which it does change over time, so it's good to have a kind of a one-stop shop for this here. And there's a dedicated Regional Haze email also that you can submit comments or questions to that I monitor. But it's always good to include me and Michael on that as well, to make sure that we get the information. And then there is a folder we've set up, which we will probably be putting this webinar in once it's, thanks to Neil for reminding us to record it. Once it's done, we'll be putting that information in the stakeholder comments and outreach info here. And I think we're pretty close here to wrapping up. So here are, or wait, okay, so that's not, next slide. So here's are some additional resources for learning about visibility at mandatory Class 1 area national parks and wilderness areas. We have the New Mexico site, the EPA site, the improved monitoring site, which is, there's quite a bit of really good information on the improved site that, as we had talked about, the monitors that collect the data to assess visibility. And then we have our regional planning organization site. The RAP technical support system has all of the technical information that we showed today was made available through that platform. And then the storyboard that we had talked about. And then some pictures of our class 1 areas. So actually I didn't update it with the new slide. So I had included the names of all of the class 1 areas here. Well, I'll just read them off. So San Pedro Parks Wilderness Area is the top left. We have Bandelier Wilderness Area, the next one over on the top. Wheeler Peak Wilderness Area. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. So Rhett Zyla, who used to work with us in the modeling section and also worked, actually helped us quite a bit with Regional Haze, is a fantastic photographer and took some pictures of the class 1 areas. I've always wanted to get out to more, but he had some and has allowed us to use some of his pictures. And he's taken some of these, which in my other slide, I had provided the photo credits, but I will just verbally do it. So this is one of his pictures from Bandelier. The right picture on the top is Wheeler Peak. And that's one that I had taken. I got to go up to the top last year, which is pretty awesome. On the second row here, we have Bosque del Apache Wilderness Area. That photo is from Kip Carrico. We have White Mountain Wilderness Area. That's another one that Rhett took, which I love that picture. And then we have the Pecos Wilderness Area, which is another of Rhett's pictures. The Gila Wilderness Area on the bottom left is from the U.S. Forest Service source and on their website. We have Salt Creek Wilderness Area, and then on the bottom right is the Carlsbad National Park. And that photo is from the National Park Service. So before we kind of move on, I did want to share the results from the survey. So let's see if I can do that. This is the first time I've done this. So I'm gonna apply poll results. See if that will share them. Are you guys seeing them? Hopefully.
I am not
Michael?
seeing them yet, Mark.
You're not? Let's see. I may have to stop sharing my screen here. Maybe if I you're sharing my screen. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And then I am going to see if all right. I know I can do this. We've been practicing this. All
It looks
right.
like people are seeing them, Mark.
Oh, they are? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just not, maybe because you're a co-host. You're
Right.
so
I might be getting a different view.
let me open it up just to take a look. So it looks like, let's see. Do you see the results on if you open up your polling screen, it should show, Michael.
Yeah, I do see the results. So going through it, it looks like our winner for the most visited Class 1 area is Carlsbad Caverns National Park by
Yeah.
far. And then it looks like some of the other ones that are a little bit more popular are Bandelier near Santa Fe, Gila Wilderness down in Grant County is also pretty popular. There's a few other, Pecos Wilderness and Bosque del Apache also has double-digit visitor numbers there. So we had 53 people in our poll and 40 of you answered. So it looks like just 3 of those that did provide answers have not visited one of our Class 1 areas. So that means you either need to get yourself out to New Mexico or you need to travel around New Mexico and get to see one of these Class 1 areas because they are breathtaking. And, you know, it really is one of the draws for a lot of us that live here in New Mexico to live and play here. So I think with that said, let me do a little time check of where we're at. I do know that we received some questions in the chat. So let me go ahead and take a look at that and see what those questions are. So the first question we got, we might be able to answer a little bit here is, how much of the pollutants do you think may be associated with agricultural production, including diesel engines used by ag? Did you want to try to tackle that, Mark?
I would need to, it's a good question. I would have to go back to the inventories and look and see how much, you know, what the emission inventory for that was for our base year and future year. That would be one, Michael, I'd probably need to follow up on.
Yeah, I think it is a pretty in-depth question that we would have to look at some modeling results for. So that we do have some information, and I think we'll get more into it in our next stakeholder engagement events about how we selected the sources that we did for four-factor analysis and some of the modeling products that we use to kind of identify which sources are impacting the class 1 areas. And so we could look into some of that information and try to get a better answer, a more well-defined answer than we could give off the top of our head. So I think that one will take a little bit of research. Thank you, Jason. I'll move on to Dean's question next. Dean, he had asked if we are doing consultations with Mexico.
Huh, interesting. No, we have not. We have not done any consultations with, or I have not done any specific consultations with Mexico pertaining to regional haze. I don't know if Armando I know that they, and Michael too, if you've been involved in the JAC, right? And you know, I don't know if the JAC has ever kind of bridged this subject or not.
You know, I have not, in my years on the JAC, I did not hear about regional haze too much. You know, regional haze is a visibility program, and I think with the JAC, we did focus a lot on public health issues. And further with with the regional haze SIP, we do consultations with other states. And those consultations are designed so that we are coordinating with those states and we're discussing our long-term strategies is what it's called with those states. And so in those consultations, that is a requirement of the role that we kind of get with the other states surrounding us and try to come up with strategies that work together to try to improve visibility on a regional scale.
Michael, I could,
So,
oh, go ahead, Armando.
oh,
Or was that, I forget, someone, I heard someone that was about to ask a question, but so the regional haze rule is very nuanced in a lot of aspects. And so as Michael was speaking, I was thinking some about the um, kind of some of the guidance and some of the information in the rule. And so the you know what when you look back at the Clean Air Act and what it's talking about, the anthropogenic impacts and whatnot, yeah, definitely there's going to be impacts that are coming from international sources. There's going to be other things outside of our control, and so the way that I understand it, my viewpoint is that so we're trying to look at, in New Mexico, we're focused on interstate emissions are important, but we're focused on the things that we do have control over. So because that's the anthropogenic component, we're not as focused on the things outside of our control. And so because of this, in the regional Haze rule, it has allowed states to, it's not mandatory, but it's allowed states to make an adjustment for impacts from international anthropogenic emissions. And so within these larger models that look at, the global emissions and how that has an effect on our local area, they've developed a method where you can actually adjust the endpoint of where we're trying to, basically our goal to natural conditions, or an endpoint that would essentially attempt to deduct the result or the impacts that come about from the international emissions, so that we can, because we don't, as a state, we don't have control over those international emissions. Now, the EPA and others on a national basis may have, some possibilities to, do some international kind of, I guess, consultations. And so I guess I would say that it would probably have to come, or kind of start probably on the national front with EPA. And then, maybe New Mexico could be a part of certain things, but I would say that's more of an international issue. But the rule does consider that as, it does acknowledge that it's not just us that's contributing to the impairment in New Mexico, that there's interstate and international emissions. So
That's right. And yeah, not to get too confusing, but the same thing for wildfire and smoke emissions. So there is some mechanisms within the regional Haze rule to account for those sources of pollution that are beyond our control.
these are good questions, Michael. And we're going to save the chat. And so if you can go ahead, if you have other questions about regional Haze, please put them in there. And even if they're hard questions, I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking, or and there are no stupid questions, right? I mean, it's a complicated rule, and or a complicated process, but we would like to hear whatever it is that your perspective is, and if you have questions, so that we can better kind of help explain maybe some of these things in the next webinars. But I think we kind of need to move forward from this. I'm glad the poll worked. That was we experimented with that and weren't quite sure if it was going to work. And thanks for thanks Rhett for the pictures. And if you guys do have pictures from the Class 1 areas that you have visited, please send them on to me. I always love to include things within presentations, but sometimes it's hard to find pictures. And if if there's ones that you're willing to share or allow us to share, just let me know, how you'd like to be acknowledged, and I'll give you the photo credits. So.
Thanks, Mark. We do have a couple other questions
Okay.
in the chat, and so Aaron, I do see your questions. I saw your two questions. We will get to those, and maybe as we're transitioning, Samantha Kretz asked about how does Bernalillo County and NMED process meet together to create the SIP that will be submitted to EPA. So I think I can tackle that pretty quickly.
Okay. Sure.
Mark had alluded to us working with Ken Miller from the city of Albuquerque. And so we are closely developing this SIP with the city of Albuquerque. They are kind of letting us take the lead on adopting the SIP first, but they are basically taking what we are doing and copying that SIP as well. And applying, they're doing their own 4-factor analysis for a source that's in their jurisdiction. and they're going to be doing their reasonable control and long-term strategy based off of the results of their four-factor analysis. So we are working closely with the City of Albuquerque to develop a complementary and parallel SIP. Okay. So moving on to the next portion of the meeting, I want to talk to you a little bit about air quality monitoring data, some of the current projects that we're working on, and some emerging issues. So we have an upcoming rulemaking. It is our incorporation by reference rulemaking, where we are taking the new source performance standards, the national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants, and the maximum achievable control technology standards, and incorporating them into the New Mexico Administrative Code. We generally do this periodically every 2 to 3 years to update our delegation and provide us the primacy to implement and enforce those standards. So we are diligently working on our petition to request a hearing before the EIB next month, and we are planning on having a June 2023 hearing for that rulemaking. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. You should be hearing a little bit more about that rulemaking soon, but it is viewed by us as a process type deal where we're just updating our delegation. So for the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, there's quite a bit going on surrounding ozone and particulate matter. We are currently trying to figure out how to move forward with ozone advance for parts of our state that are part of that, or what we refer to as the Ozone Attainment Initiative. We are short-staffed right now. For those of you that have been following us, you may have noticed that we are short 2 or 3 folks on my staff, and so we're looking to get staffed up and start looking at how we're going to tackle some of our planning for ozone. So that includes ozone advance, but also some of the SIP planning that we have for our non-attainment areas and some of the areas that we expect may become designated as non-attainment. So in Sunland Park area down in Doña Ana County by El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, we do have some ozone issues that we do feel that are caused by international transport. So we have developed that SIP. And we've also developed a 179B demonstration and submitted that to the Environmental Protection Agency for their review and hopefully concurrence that we would be attaining the standard in Sunland Park, but for international emissions. So we're waiting for action on that right now. There's also an area in the Permian Basin of New Mexico where our monitors are showing values above the standard, and EPA has indicated in their regulatory agenda that they plan on redesignating that area to non-attainment in the future. So EPA had indicated that would be done by the end of last year, and so I am anticipating that that should come anytime now. So once that does happen, we will have to start getting work done for a non-attainment SIP. Some of the other big news about surrounds particulate matter. So EPA is looking at that standard and looking to revise the PM 2.5 annual standard. So they are proposing to lower that standard from 12 micrograms per meter cubed down to a range between 9 and 10 micrograms per meter cubed. And I believe they're taking comment on a standard as low as 8 micrograms per meter cube. So that could be coming up. Depending on how low that standard gets dropped, we could be butting up against that standard, or even if it's set at 8 or as low as 8, then we could be facing non-attainment in some areas. The PM10 standard, is proposed to remain unchanged. So that one we shouldn't be facing any additional work than we currently do. And what we're seeing as well with particulate matter, if you were in New Mexico last year, you definitely felt the wildfire smoke. I think over the last 10 years, if you've lived in New Mexico, you've definitely noticed wildfire smoke more and more. And another thing that we get, and we just got this week, was a dust storm. And we are starting to record exceedances at monitoring sites that we have not recorded these exceedances in the past. So we do have some PM10 exceedances that were recorded in San Juan County. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in our next presentation. So I just want to give a brief update on some of the air quality data that we have. So taking a look at ozone first, I want to provide everyone with some updated but preliminary data on our ozone design values. So ozone design values are used to compare monitoring data to the standard, and they tell us whether or not we are in compliance with that standard. For ozone, design values are calculated based on the 3-year average of the 4th highest 8-hour average recorded in a year. So that's a mouthful, but we basically look at the 4th highest 8-hour average from each year. And if you look at the x-axis, you can see that these are 3-year periods. On the far right, you can see it's 2020 through 2022. And so you get those 4 highest values, you average those, and you come up with a design value. You can see our highest reporting site is in orange there. That is our Desert View site in Doña Ana, near the El Paso and Ciudad Juarez metro area. That site has had compliance problems and ozone issues for quite some time. But if you take a look at that, it was stuck at 72 parts per billion for a long time. And for the past 6-7 years, that has been going up. So we have seen an increase in the ozone concentrations there. And at the same time, when we started seeing ozone concentrations increase in Doña Ana County, we also started seeing ozone increase in Eddy County. So if you look in that gold or yellow line, the second highest recording site in New Mexico is at Carlsbad. So a little bit earlier, I was talking about the Permian Basin possibly being designated non-attainment. We can see that for the last 4 or 5, let me see, 1, 2, 5 averaging periods that we've had monitoring data that is above the standard. We also take a look here. I did throw in some data for the city of Albuquerque. So this is their foothills monitor, and they are also showing a violation of the standard. For us, the rest of the state, we are seeing some high values. If you take a look, that red solid bar is the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, and the red dotted line is the 95% of that value. And that's important because above 95% is where counties are included in our Ozone Advance and Ozone Attainment Initiative, which includes the ozone precursor role. So moving on, and to note again, the 2020 through 2022 data is preliminary. It is pending validation and submittal to EPA. So that this data is not final. So please do not take this back as these are final values. So 2020 through 2022 are preliminary data. For particulate matter, the design value is calculated a little bit differently. You calculate a 3-year average of the expected number of exceedances, and that calculation cannot exceed 1.0. So the calculated number of exceedances or expected number of exceedances is a statistical method for us to capture the way that particulate matter is monitored. And so there is a calculation to cover days when monitoring does not occur. But if we look at this data here, we can see that there's some of our areas in the state have had some issues with complying with that standard, especially in Doña Ana and Luna County. But if you take a look there at Bernalillo County has had some in the past, and San Juan as well. But it looks like in the recent 3 to 4 years that we started to see a little bit more increase in San Juan and Bernalillo County exceedances. So that tells me that we're starting to see more windblown dust in the state and more widespread. And so I think now it's time for me to turn over the microphone to Armando Paz to talk a little bit more about how NMED deals with our PM10 problem and a little bit about what particulate matter is and some of the health effects of it. So Armando, you're on.
Thank you, Michael. And so particulate matter, PM10 in the form of PM10 and PM2.5, these aerosols, solids, or even liquid droplets come in the form of soil, dust, sea spray, biological sources, such as pollen, spores, viruses, smoke, fly ash, sulfates, nitrates, organic carbon, elemental carbon, and soot, as well as air toxins. And so to kind of get an idea how big these particles, or I should say how small these particles are, if we want to go ahead and compare to a size of a human hair, between 50 to 70 microns in diameter. If we have a 50 diameter hair, 50 micron diameter hair, we have 5 of these PM10 particles that will stretch across it. And then within one PM10 particle, you can have 4 PM2.5 particles. And so, like I mentioned, a lot of these sources are, I guess you can say, come from dust, smoke, biological, as well as combustion byproducts, as well as from industrial. Next slide, please. And some of the health effects that we experience from particulate matter include irritation as well as inflammation of the upper airways. And so these larger size particles from the 10 to 2.5 microns in aero diameter size, they affect the mouth, nose, and throat tissues, which these particles come into contact with. These smaller particle sizes, less than 2.5 microns in aero diameter, they affect the middle to the lower airways or the deep lungs where the alveoli sacs are located, which does create a route of entry to other target organs such as the heart and brain through the bloodstream. The lungs are a very efficient means of uptaking ultrafine particles that can make their way into the blood-brain barrier in a relatively short period of time. So the short-term effects can include coughing, sneezing, phlegm production, which are the body's natural responses to removing these particles from our lungs. Long-term effects can be as mild as chronic bronchitis or a persistent cough all the way to the extreme end with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. Toxic or hazardous air pollutants can have effect on other target organs or are highly dependent on a chemical species, concentration, and the duration that one is exposed to, either in the short or long term. Immunocompromised individuals or even the elderly are at an increased risk from the effects due to particulate matter, such as those who suffer from asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, COVID-19, as well as RSV. Children are particularly vulnerable to the effects of particulate matter since the amount of lung capacity relative to their bodies are more demanding than average adult. Steps to minimize exposure to particulate matter include using nose and mouth coverings such as dust masks, respirators, as well as minimizing the time outdoors during dust storms and periods of intense wildfire smoke. Next slide, please. And so our monitoring network for particulate matter in the southern portion of the state, we have a total of 6 PM10 sites and then a total of 5 PM2.5 sites. And so this is our most dense network within the state. And it's mostly within southern Doña Ana County, as well as going into Luna County. We do have a PM2.5 monitoring site on the eastern edge of New Mexico, along with the western edge of Texas at the Haze monitoring site. And so we do have a couple of monitors at the very south of our state that have both PM10 as well as PM2.5 sites, which includes our Desert View as well as our Anthony monitoring sites. Next slide, please. And so our northern sites for particulate matter include for PM10 is the San Juan substation up in the Four Corners region. And then for our PM2.5 sites, we have one in Santa Fe as well as one in Taos. And so the Albuquerque and Bernalillo County has their own monitoring network that is a separate jurisdiction. I just wanted to point out. And so for non-attainment for the NACs, particularly for the PM10 1987 standard, it is 150 micrograms per cubic meter. It is a 24-hour standard. And so it can't be exceeded no more than one exceedance per year. And so it is a 3-year average that the design value is based on. And so the non-attainment status results in increased permitting as well as elevated controls. So this will be incorporated into the state implementation plan, as well as we'll include emissions inventories as part of that. It does have a possible stigma associated with it as far as having an adverse economic impact on non-attainment areas. And so, it is not appropriate in some situations, such as the exceptional events rule. Next slide, please. And so as far as the exceptional events rule, it is promulgated under 40 CFR section 50.14. And this is in regards to the PM exceedances due to mostly natural events such as wildfires, stratospheric intrusions, as well as our lovely windblown dust events. So there are some instances where anthropogenic activity is included, such as fireworks and other events that may not be likely to recur. And so we submit these demonstrations annually to EPA for these violations of the NACs. And what we're needing to demonstrate is a clear causal relationship that it is related to natural events or human activity that is unlikely to recur. So along with that, we do have to provide we have to justify that it's not reasonably controllable or preventable. And it's mostly associated with our wind speeds and making sure that we're meeting certain wind speed criteria. And so for our next slide, please. For our PM10 mitigation plans, it is under Clean Air Act Section 319, as well as 40 CFR 51.930. And it is required for recurring events. So NMED's dust mitigation plan does apply to Luna and Doña Ana counties. And included with that is public notification and education programs. What's included is advance notice of event forecasting, outreach and education mechanisms, as well as health-based advisories. The mitigation measures that are implemented do minimize the public exposure. That's our whole goal, is to minimize the exposure to vulnerable populations. We do need to have controls in place, such as our Part 23, our fugitive dust rule. And so our goal is to show that it is natural and there is not an anthropogenic component to it. And so we do consult with air quality managers and do allow for like a comment period for these mitigation plans, which part of our periodic review and evaluation, which is every 3 years. So we're about due for revision. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Armando. So now I think, now that we wrapped it up, I think we want to take a little bit of questions, comments, or ideas that came up. I know we have some in the chat that I would like to look at, and we want these questions to cover any of the projects, plans, or roles that were mentioned today, and especially some of those ideas that we might be able to take back to enhance our stakeholder engagement efforts. So provide us some of that feedback of what's working for you, what's not working for you. That sort of thing I think is what we're kind of looking for, as far as scheduling, platforms, that type of thing, just to try to make our process easier and for you to participate in, those types of things. So we're open to any and all feedback, and you can, feel free to put that into the chat. Feel free to email us any of this information. Feel free to raise your hand, and we will unmute you and or allow you to unmute yourself and provide any question, comments, or ideas. We also are going to provide you, on the presentation, we are going to provide some additional resources that will go over some of the contact information we have and some of the websites that are very helpful to you. So here we have, as Mark had said, we are going to have 2 additional regional Haze stakeholder engagement events that are currently planned and we have registration for. So visit our events calendar to get signed up for those. Regional Haze feedback. If you have any specific regional Haze feedback, you can send it to our dedicated email or to Mark. You can give him a call or you can email me as well. You can check out our website, or you can contact any of the control strategy staff that's listed here as well for any of the projects. If any of us, you contact any of us, we are always willing to help people out and try to at least direct people to the right place to talk to. Oh, it looks like Mark is changing his phone number in real time there. So that's good. We'll be sure to make sure that is correct in the final posting of these slides. So I think the final slide is just a bunch of websites that I think I like to add. That way, if you do download this this presentation, you can take this back on your own time and kind of do some homework to kind of educate yourself a little bit more about air quality, about any of these topics that we're talking about today, to try to help you come up with ideas and ways to interact with us better. So hopefully these are of interest to you. And if you need any assistance with trying to navigate any of these sites, I am more than willing. I think any of my staff is also more than willing to try to walk you through that. So just let us know if you need assistance with these. So now it is time to get back to the questions and answers and some of the communication portion that we would like to have here. So Armando, I think there was one question here regarding PM10 and particulate matter. There was a statement that a lot of the blowing dust could come from degraded rangeland or cropland that doesn't have proper residue management or cover. This gentleman is asking if you think we have any geographic areas that might contribute more to the PM10 non-attainment area. So rangelands, do you have any feeling for how rangelands affect our blowing dust?
Yes, and so definitely rangelands are a source of natural wind-blown dust, and so especially now, more so now with the drought conditions, and it seems like we're kind of coming out of that drought from past years. So we're still feeling the effects of that persistent drought for so long, and so a lot of our source areas here in southern Doña County, are south of the border, and so we have some dried lake beds that are called playas. That is a major source for a lot of our particulate matter exceedances here in southern Doña County. And so I know more like as we start going further up north to like the San Juan area or San Juan County area, I know that there's some areas that are along the western border of New Mexico and eastern Arizona. It kind of like whenever I see it on the satellite imagery, whenever it's occurring, it looks like it's happening like it's north of like Thoreau and like the Navajo area, reservation area, as well as like if you start going a little bit more to the west, there's in the Arizona area. If you look on the satellite imagery, there's areas north of like I think it's Solo, and there's like a lot of desert area up there that kind of the wind direction and the wind speeds are just right. It'll uh, make its way to our monitoring site, and then it's even going as far north up to Pagosa Springs. So our neighbors in Colorado are even experiencing the effects of those dust sources. And so, as far as those natural sources, they're definitely a major source. But as far as like going back to the rangelands, we're in constant consultation. We're pretty much in consultation with our land managers as far as how they go about implementing better management practices in regards to agriculture. So that's part of our dust mitigation plan that we revise every so often. That we're in constant communication with our stakeholders that are tasked with those responsibilities.
Thanks, Armando.
You're welcome.
Okay, the other question we do have is about the time frame for completing the SIP. So the one question is, when is a draft SIP going to be released for public comment, and when do we plan to submit that to EPA? The other question is very similar, and it's the time frame for completing the SIP, and what info do we need from stakeholders before we release a draft SIP? So I think maybe I'll address the timeframe question first, and maybe let Mark address the stakeholder info question a little bit more. So I do know that we have a timeline published on our website that says we do plan on submitting the SIP early. So that timeline that we do have earlier than we are anticipating now. So that timeline that we do have on the website is currently undergoing revisions, and we don't have a solid timeline in place to give you definitive answers right now. So we are working diligently to complete the SIP and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to do all the technical and administrative procedures that we need to do in order to develop a strong SIP that we want to take before the board for adoption. With that said, we are late in submitting this SIP, and EPA has issued a finding of failure to submit that SIP. So we do have a deadline to submit our SIP to EPA by September of 2024, or face to submit it and have EPA approve it, or face the promulgation of a federal implementation plan for regional haze. So we are doing our plumb best to get that SIP in before that deadline and to avoid a FIP from EPA. With that said, I do believe that once we have a draft available for sharing with the FLMs, that we are going to be sharing that fairly widely with the public as well. So there will be some time before we even go to the board to request a hearing where people will have access to a draft SIP to provide comment to us on that before we even get to the hearing phase. So once we go through the FLM consultation and we receive public input from the public, then we will take that draft to the board and we'll have an additional formal public comment period at that time. So hopefully that provides some information about time frame. I know that's a little bit slippery, but we do not have one nailed down at this time to provide you with definitive dates. Beyond that, we do not want to miss the deadline for submitting that of September 2024. Mark, do you want to tackle the question about what types of information that we might need from stakeholders as we're developing this SIP? Um, do you have any idea on that?
You know, Michael, it's a really good question. These are kind of some of the questions that we were hoping that would come out of this meeting with beginning to re-engage with stakeholders. And I mean, it seems kind of like a no-brainer. Yeah, well, what if you want to engage and get feedback? Well, what specific things are could you use feedback on? And so, you know, I had mentioned before, we're kind of taking this step at a time. And you know, we've been looking at step one with the ambient data analysis. There isn't a whole bunch of you know, the EPA requirements on how that particular step is conducted is fairly rigid and straightforward with what's the requirement for the state. Um, some of the other steps may have some more flexibility and, you know, discretion that the state has as to how we might pursue certain things. Or, you know, and so I would, you know, maybe I'll just say, I think we'll need to talk about that a little bit more internally. Michael gave a really good kind of outline of some of the steps, though. When we do eventually release a schedule, it'll include phases so that hopefully we'll be able to be relatively clear about, you know, when we're done with the draft version of the proposal, then we will be doing some informal solicitation of comments. You know, honestly, if any comment is welcome at any time, but it's probably harder to make comments when there isn't something in front of you that you can review and then, you know, make comments on. And so we haven't released any, you know, kind of pre hearing versions yet to the public. And so I think, you know, time-wise, that probably wouldn't come earlier than the end of this year. But as we're going through these steps, I think, Michael, I guess one idea I would have would be maybe we could look at some of the different facets of each of the steps and see if there's particular things that that we could kind of highlight as things that would be good to receive some feedback on.
Definitely, and I think we will have to think about, you know, the perspective that we're receiving these comments from, and we're encouraging all stakeholders to provide us comments. So we're looking for the general public, but we're also from industry and from environmental groups and from anyone, you know. So it's not just from any one group or any one viewpoint. We're trying to get the broadest viewpoint as possible. So any and all comments are welcome on any aspects of the Regional Haze program. And as Mark said, that's a little bit difficult to provide specific comments, but you can provide general comments at any time. You know, you guys need to change your approach. You guys need to hurry up. You know, those types of things. It definitely helps us to communicate some of the information that we're getting from the public to our upper management and let them know, you know, how this is being viewed in that sphere and how that shapes our decision making in the way we move forward. We are moving as fast as we can. It's just it is a huge project. You know, we have very few staff in our control strategies right now. It's just us here. It's 4 people in control strategies, and we have one of the most complicated regional Haze SIPs in the country. We have 23 facilities that we're looking at and 9 Class 1 areas. We're also looking at, you know, the states that surround us. We're kind of in the middle of Class 1 area country, you know, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, California. You know, these are states that have tons of Class 1 areas, and So we're really trying to work with everyone and take a look at what we're doing to provide a real high quality SIP and make sure that we have confidence in the SIP that we are developing, that we're putting out there, that we haven't rushed it and that we haven't neglected any parts of that process. And one thing I might want to highlight as far as process wise is that Mark was showing the 8 steps of the regional Haze process. One thing we saw this graphic a while back is that this process is not linear. It really isn't like you do one step, then the next. And Mark had hinted at that we were doing these steps kind of some before others. We did, if you've been following with us, we did the selection of sources before we did modeling, like Mark said. So step 3 came before, a lot of the other, some of the other steps that we've done. The modeling was late, so that took a while. And so some of these are in various stages of being complete, and some are relying on other steps to be complete before they can actually get done. So we saw this really, the graphic I was referring to is, we have the steps in line to do them this way, but you actually go up and then you come around and do a circle and then you go this way and you come this way and then back, and then so you revisit each of these steps maybe numerous times, and there's different iterations of your plan development depending on the information that we analyze and some of the consultations we have and the feedback that we get. So there's a lot of moving parts, but we do welcome a lot of that.
Michael, I wanted to add that you had kind of alluded to that there's so many different stakeholders within a lot of these projects, but Regional Haze is one that, because it's a national program, and then there's the federal, from the beginning in the background, if you remember, in talking about the Clean Air Act, there's a lot of roles for our partners too, the federal land managers. There's a consultation requirement within the rule that we, we're not just in that consultation. It's not just that they make comments and then that we record that, but that we provide, kind of bring them along in the process and provide some meaningful engagement, I guess, in a early enough phase before we actually, decide on a final SIP and then go to hearing. And so there's several different groups of stakeholders from industry, from the FLMs, EPA, other states, that all have a little different maybe viewpoint of regional haze. There's a diagram of a cartoon showing regional haze as an elephant, and there's people really close to the elephant that see different things with regional haze from different perspectives. And I think we respect that and appreciate that, and that can actually make our plan stronger to see these different parts of the whole. And so, these larger stakeholder engagement meetings are one avenue for communicating with us on regional haze, but I would also encourage, like, whether it's industry or other particular kind of subgroups of stakeholders, that perhaps some more, more different avenues for engagement at those levels might also be very valuable for us to talk about, the specific concerns of that particular sector or that particular agency or group of agencies. So I guess I just like to encourage, what if there are ideas or people that have a vantage point or a perspective that they would like to meet with us in a smaller group. I think we're open to that, trying to make that happen. And
Definitely.
were there other questions, Michael? Not to move off the timeline, but I know we're kind of close to the end of the hour here.
We got about 8 minutes left. We are receiving some appreciation from the public. Thank you for that. We do like to get that kind of feedback and know that you appreciate this and find it valuable. You know, when we're doing these things, we don't know how much value we are bringing to you. So it is very, that's the type of feedback that we want. You know, and I think right now, maybe we can just open it up for a few seconds, let people gather their thoughts and maybe see if they have any feedback that they would like to provide us on. You know, right now, some of the information we would like is on our outreach, you know, so maybe you can provide some info on some of the audiences maybe that we're missing, you know, some of the stakeholder groups that we are not reaching, you know, through our traditional communication methods and ways that we can think about possibly engaging them. You know, what kind of venues work, you know, the in-person, are you really wanting to see that in person again, or are you just happy, you know, logging on from your house or, you know, your workplace or, you know, wherever and not having to make the travel. You know, those kinds of things will be helpful in the different platforms. So we use WebEx quite a bit in the New Mexico Environment Department for our larger meetings due to, you know, like the IT issues and licensing that we do have. But we also have Teams and we also have access to Zoom and other platforms that we might be able to use. So we would also like some feedback on that to see, you know, just I'm trying to just, you know, gather some of your generate maybe some ideas and some thoughts for discussion. So I will leave it at that, I think, and see if we have anyone raise their hand or add anything in the chat to see if they'd like to discuss anything. So you don't have to provide feedback right now. Any comments, questions, anything is welcome at this time. So I think it's just open mic right now. I'm sorry, I muted myself. We have Jason uh, who has his hand up. Would you like to say something, Jason?
Hi, thank you, Michael. First of all, I really appreciate all this great information. Um, Thank you for all the hard work you're putting in, and the fact that it's just the four of you working on this, I'm really impressed at how much you've gotten done already. I'm excited to see what you come up with. Um, I wanted to just kind of chime in. I know you had talked a little bit about stakeholders and reaching out to the different land management entities out here, but you know we have a fair amount of ag land out there that is with private landowners, and um, I work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and a lot of the work we do is getting conservation practices on the ground for private landowners. And I want to make sure that the work we're doing is coordinating with your strategy for reducing particulate matter and also looking at ways that we can reduce some of those NOx emissions on private ag land. And
Great, thanks, Jason. Yeah, Armando, I think would be our best contact. So I think Armando can take it back. You said you're with NRCS.
yes, sir.
Great. So I think that, you know, we used to work with NRCS quite a bit with our dust mitigation plan, and Armando is going to, I think, take a note of this, of your name, and possibly be in contact with you. I know that NRCS used to have the EQUIP program, which would provide, you know, low interest or no payback loans to farmers and other agricultural folks to implement practices that reduce air pollution.
We still do
I
have
know that was
the
something.
EQUIP program and NCSP, and both of those programs are also getting a large infusion of money due to the Inflation Reduction Act. So, you know, in the next 4 or 5 years or so, we're going to have a lot of extra money to get on the ground to help producers.
Excellent. Did you have anything to add to that, Armando, or?
No, I'll just go ahead and just echo what you had said. I mean, it'll be good to touch base and I'll have a little more discussion as far as how we can be able to integrate our strategies to be able to um, get at these PM and PM levels, these rangelands. And so I don't know how, maybe if you want to reach out to me and send me an email so we can follow up this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jason. We did get another question regarding environmental justice outreach and what kind of any help we need on that. So definitely one of the emerging topics, or I don't know, I want to say keywords, is meaningful engagement. And we are still trying to figure out what that means to us as an agency. And I think part of figuring that out is getting out here and doing these stakeholder engagement events and trying to figure out what is meaningful to our stakeholders. You know, I don't think us as regulators and what we think is meaningful really is what is important. You know, I think what's really important is what's meaningful to the people that we are presenting to. And so I think what we really need is that kind of input where I was talking about, you know, what are those stakeholders that we are not reaching? You know, in the past with some of our rulemakings, I know they impacted tribal lands a little bit more than some of our other rulemakings. And we were told that the way that we're presenting the information is not coherent with the way that the tribe would live their life, or the way the tribe perceives the world and interacts with the world around them. And so that we needed to do a better job of realizing that and presenting the information that's more relatable to that group of stakeholders anyway. And so there's a lot that would go into that, you know, finding the proper venues, and there's language barriers and a lot of things that we need to figure out along the way. But if we can get any suggestions, you know, of how to do that, of you know, communication methods that are more effective for certain stakeholders above others, I think that is some of the very helpful information that we can use. You know, currently we do develop the public involvement plans and the limited English proficiency analysis to try to look at how we're going to conduct our outreach and in what languages we're going to provide information in. So we do those, and that helps us with the language and accessibility issues. But I do think there's still some ways where we need to be better, more of a two-way communication, I believe. I know in my experiences, it's a lot of us talking to you and talking at you, instead of it being more of a more informed discussion in a two-way venue. And I think we're trying to get to that point where we're not, you know, talking at you, where we're allowing the stakeholders to provide us input and guide the way we are moving forward. So I think that would be forthcoming, you know, as these new rigs come out. I think we will start identifying those specific issues. You know, one action item I think that is forming for us is that we need to identify these more fully before asking for or soliciting, you know, the public input. I think maybe next time we do the stakeholder engagement, we can have a slide of ideas of different topics or areas where stakeholder feedback would be especially useful, and what types of feedback. So I think these questions are great. These are the types of things we need to help us think and help us get through this. Okay, we are past the hour. It's 6:01, so I do want to say thank you to everyone for attending today. I do want to thank my staff for putting in all this hard work, and to all. Hopefully you have a great rest of your evening. Go home and enjoy dinner and your family, and hopefully you're having some nice air quality out there today. But we hope to see you on our next stakeholder engagement event.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close the WebEx now. We will talk later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, let me save the chat.
Oh yeah. If Kirby had a note on her
On your
note
desktop.
to do it, so I couldn't find how to do it, but
Yeah, I did save the chat,
okay.
but Mike should save it too. Because more copies are better.
Can you send me a copy or share it in Teams?
Yeah. I'll send the copy to all of you in just a few minutes.
Great. And thanks, Michael and Kirby too. It's, I can feel some momentum here, and I think we all appreciate the direction in some of the leadership we're getting. So let's keep trudging on.
Yeah, good meeting everyone. I think it went well and it was well received by everyone, as far as we can tell anyway. It's a start, and yeah, I think we did fine. Oh, did we lose Mark?
Yeah, we lost Mark.
I've lost my, but yes, you all
Wow.
did a great job. I'm very impressed. I think it went very well.
Thanks, Kirby.
Thanks. It's still recording. I don't know if that matters or not.
I'll stop it.